The mansion echoed when she laughed. Not in a warm way. Not the way it used to echo when we danced barefoot across the marble floor or when she surprised me with burnt pancakes on my birthday. No. This laugh was colder, sharp, triumphant, and hollow. My name is Caleb Monroe, and I built this house with the money my father left me. I furnished it with memories I thought would last. And I handed the keys, the security codes, the very foundation of my legacy, to her. To Sabrina. She stood by the grand piano, the one she never played but insisted we display for aesthetic balance, her crystal wine glass catching the chandelier light like a weapon of status. "Thanks for the inheritance, darling," she said, swirling the last sip of red like it was the blood of every foolish man who came before me. I needed it to build my startup. Then she tossed the glass. Not at me. Not at anything in particular. Just casually, like throwing away the wrapper of something already consumed. It shattered across the Italian marble floor, custom-laid tile I had supervised myself. That glass wasn't the first thing broken in that house. Just the most honest. I didn't respond. I didn't yell or ask why. I didn't fall apart or plead for a second chance. I stood there, my hands loose at my sides, my tongue a stone in my mouth, staring at the woman I once trusted with everything. She looked pleased, almost disappointed that I wasn't falling apart the way she must have imagined. "My new boyfriend needs space," she added, as if I were the clutter. "You understand, right?" I didn't nod. I didn't shake my head either. I just turned around, each step echoing like the last few heartbeats of a dying belief. The hallway felt longer than usual. The walls taller. I passed the framed pictures she hadn't bothered to take down yet, photos of us in Florence, us hiking up the trails in Colorado, us building this life that clearly only I believed in. I remembered the night I told her about the inheritance. I had taken her to that quiet vineyard she loved, ordered that ridiculously expensive Malbec she'd once said tasted like velvet and thunder, and handed her the news like it was a proposal. "We can build anything now," I told her. "Whatever you dream, I'll back it." She chose Vivewell, a wellness tech venture that promised holistic harmony through AI-driven diagnostics and micronutrition plans. I gave her $5 million without hesitation, drafted the contracts myself, even wrote her pitch deck. I believed in her. Or maybe I just wanted to believe that love and vision could exist in the same room. Now I see it clearly. That was never the plan. Not for her. By the time I reached the front door, my heart was strangely calm. Not numb. Not shattered. Just still. Like it was standing still to let something new grow beneath it. I paused, turned the handle, and looked back one last time. Sabrina was already texting someone. Probably Julian, the so-called new visionary she'd found in her co-working circle. The man who wore cardigans with no undershirt and talked about energetic frequency more than revenue streams. That's when it hit me. Not the betrayal, not the rage, not even the humiliation. It was the certainty. She didn't know. She had no idea what I'd already done, and that made all the difference. She thought she was closing the door on a man she used and discarded. She didn't realize she'd just started a countdown. I stepped out into the night, the wind catching the tail of my coat like a signal flag. I didn't slam the door. I didn't look back again. There are moments in life when clarity doesn't come with lightning or fire, but with silence. That night, walking down the driveway beneath a moonless sky, I wasn't thinking about revenge. I was thinking about control, about precision, about the blueprint I had quietly tucked away for a day just like this. She saw me as a stepping stone. I had positioned myself as one on purpose. But beneath the surface of that stone was bedrock, legal layers, contractual clause, and a paper trail so clean even I was impressed with myself. I had spent the last 6 months preparing for this moment, not because I knew exactly what she would do, but because I knew exactly who she was. When I reached the car, I didn't start it right away. I sat there, hands on the wheel, watching the mansion shrink in the rearview mirror. It still looked beautiful from the outside, but I knew better. I knew what echoed inside when she laughed, and I knew that echo was about to change. I don't believe in gut feelings. I believe in patterns, in silence that lingers too long, in glances that slide too quickly away, in phones that are always face down, even during dinner. That's how it started with Sabrina, subtle shifts. She didn't slam doors or scream accusations. No, she just stopped showing up in the quiet ways, the way she used to rest her hand on my back as she passed by, or how she'd instinctively lean her head on my shoulder while we watched the evening news. That kind of love leaves quietly, and that's exactly how I started tracking its exit. It began with a weekend conference in Napa. Sabrina said it was for ViveWell to pitch investors. I offered to come. She smiled and said, "You'd be bored. It's mostly spa influencers and chakra healers." When she returned, she smelled like a different cologne and had a new robe in her luggage, a men's robe. I didn't say anything. Not yet. Instead, I called Renee. I met Renee 6 years ago when she helped a colleague of mine uncover corporate embezzlement in a joint venture. She was smart, discreet, and surgical in how she handled intel. The kind of person who preferred facts over speculation. I gave her Sabrina's travel calendar, her email aliases, her known associates. "Don't break into anything," I told her. "Just follow the scent." Then I called Marshall Briggs. If Renee was the eyes, Marshall was the hands. A forensic accountant who once traced $1.2 million through 13 dummy corporations in under a week. I handed him limited access to the ViveWell books, the ones I could legally touch as co-funder, and let him do what he does best. In the meantime, I played the part, the quiet, dependable husband. I smiled at her Instagram stories, tapped the occasional heart on her business launch teasers. I hosted investor dinners and watched her beam under chandeliers, her arm laced in mine like nothing was wrong. And maybe nothing was wrong in her mind, because she thought I was still blind. But every night, after the dishes were rinsed and the fireplace dimmed, I sat in my study, downloaded reports, matched timestamps, compiled receipts. By week 4, I had enough to know ViveWell's money was leaking, slowly, strategically, into untraceable pipelines that ended in accounts registered to an Enlightenment Future LLC, a holding company in Julian Rhodes' name. Julian, the boyfriend, the visionary wellness guru who gave talks about fasting and crypto. I watched a few of his YouTube videos. He rambled about unlocking your higher self while sipping imported blue algae smoothies. He had a smooth voice, practiced charm, and no real business sense. But what he did have was access. Access to my wife. And through her, access to my inheritance. I didn't lash out. That would have been predictable. I printed things out instead. Created folders. Labeled them by date, transaction, and associated shell account. I even highlighted the deposits timed right after our board meetings. Renee sent me photos, Julian and Sabrina at a private villa in Tulum, walking barefoot across white sand. A time-stamped receipt from the airport lounge. Him kissing her neck, her laughing, unaware that the photographer crouched behind a beach umbrella had captured the whole betrayal in a single shot. But the most damning piece came from Marshall. A spreadsheet, elegant, concise, irrefutable, detailing $680,000 quietly reclassified as Wellness Partnership R&D. Most of it ended in Julian's account. The rest? Funneled into 3 other shell core, all tied to the same parent IP address, Sabrina's office laptop. Still, I said nothing, because I wasn't ready yet. I met with Avery Kane twice a week. He's my lawyer, but also my oldest friend. We once sold baseball cards in middle school to fund a lemonade stand empire. He knew what I was building before I even explained. "You sure you want to go this route?" he asked, looking over the contract revisions I drafted. I nodded. She bet on my silence. Let's make sure she regrets it. Together, we finalized the ownership structure, a quiet clause buried in the founding documents of ViveWell, my 51% majority stake, protected and immune to dilution unless formally signed off by me. Which, of course, never happened. Sabrina never read the fine print. She was always more interested in the branding than the bylaws. But I had read every word. Before she could drain my accounts, I made one final move. I created a trust under a different name, moved the remaining inheritance, and locked it under a clause triggered by sudden account activity over $500,000. That clause fired when her final transfer hit. By the time she looked into the account, it was already closed. Empty. I didn't do this out of anger. I did it out of necessity. She saw me as a backup plan. A bank with a beard. Someone to support her vision while she sculpted a future without me. What she didn't know was, I had vision too. And mine had her walking straight into a carefully drawn box, every side sealed with facts. So, when she finally threw me out like a couch she'd grown tired of, she believed she'd won. But that night, while she raised her glass in victory, I sat alone in a downtown suite, watching the secure files upload to my encrypted drive. Renee and Marshall had done their parts. Avery had the legal kill switch ready. And me? I just pressed send. She thought I'd break, that I'd crumple on the floor like her discarded wine glass, that I'd beg her not to leave me, or worse, promise to wait for her to come back. But I didn't. I handed her the keys, looked her dead in the eye, and walked into the stormy night without a word. No theatrics, no slammed doors, just quiet footsteps and a silence so sharp it could have sliced through the marble beneath her bare feet. I disappeared from her world that night, but I didn't vanish. There's a difference. The rain had already started by the time I reached the end of the driveway. It came down in sheets, soaking through my coat, slicking my hair to my forehead. It felt like a baptism, a rebirth. Cold, yes, but clean. I didn't bother to turn back. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of knowing whether I hesitated. She didn't deserve that much. I got into the car I'd parked 2 streets down, an old black Lexus I'd kept under a different LLC for years. She didn't know about it. Just like she didn't know about the new SIM card in my pocket or the ID I'd created under the name Evan Rhodes. The irony of borrowing her boyfriend's last name wasn't lost on me. I was always good with details. The suite I checked into was downtown, overlooking the skyline she used to say inspired her. It was cold and sterile, just the way I wanted it. No memories on the walls. No laughter bouncing off the ceiling. Just quiet. I tossed my soaked coat on the armchair, peeled off my damp clothes, and stood for a long minute in front of the floor-to-ceiling window, watching the city blink back at me. This was the beginning of her end. And my beginning. I made one call. Avery Kane answered on the second ring. "You're out?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "It's time." He didn't ask what happened. He didn't need to. We'd been preparing for this. He was already in motion. Avery was more than a lawyer. He was the kind of person you only call when you're ready to rewrite the rules. "We'll execute the ownership clause tonight," he said. "I'll push the legal notifications to Vivewell's board by morning." I hung up and stared at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the air conditioning and the soft thunder rolling in the distance. My phone buzzed 3 times in a row. Sabrina. Her name flashed across the screen like an unfunny joke. I didn't answer. She probably thought I was sulking, that I'd be back in a week with apologies and flowers, maybe even an offer to help her and Julian scale Vivewell further. That's what she expected, what she was counting on. She had no idea I still owned the company. When she first asked me to fund her startup, she never read the full contract. She skimmed the headlines, smiled, and signed where Avery told her to. In her mind, it was a gesture of love, something I'd done to help her become more than a wife. But in reality, it was business. I funded it through Monroe Strategies, my holding firm, not from our joint account. And with Avery's help, I'd built in an ownership clause that protected me. A quiet 51%. The majority. She could pitch, posture, even parade her team in front of cameras, but the company still legally belonged to me. She thought I was gone, that I'd bowed out. But I hadn't left the game. I was simply letting her play herself into a corner. Over the next few days, I watched from the shadows. Sabrina flooded social media with photos of her and Julian, sitting on panels, laughing over lattes, smiling next to a whiteboard covered in buzzwords. The future of intuitive wellness, one headline read. Meet the couple redefining healing. I laughed, not out of bitterness, out of disbelief. She really thought I was the fool in this story, that I'd poured my inheritance into her hands like water and didn't think to protect the well it came from. Every press release, every staged snapshot, every quote she gave to Forbes only tightened the net around her. She had no clue the house she was decorating with betrayal had a foundation I still controlled. Vivewell's IPO was 2 weeks away. They had no idea the silent owner was still alive and watching, waiting. Sabrina and Julian thought they had won. Perfect story, perfect launch, perfect illusion. But illusions are delicate things. And I'd spent months setting up the storm that would shatter hers. I spent that night reviewing documents, scrubbing emails, and triple-checking the timeline with Avery. Every transfer she made, every shady dollar sent to Julian's shell companies, every misuse of investor funds, it was all accounted for. Sabrina didn't know it yet, but the empire she thought she'd stolen had a trapdoor. And I was holding the lever. So yes, I disappeared. I let her believe she'd beaten me. But she never understood who I was. I wasn't just the man behind her fortune. I was the architect. And very soon, I would be the demolition crew, too. 2 weeks passed. 2 quiet, calculated weeks. Long enough for Sabrina and Julian to bask in their delusions, short enough for them not to see the storm coming. The Vivewell IPO pitch day was here. A sleek, curated event at the heart of the city's innovation district. Glass walls, champagne flutes, bright lights that made liars look like visionaries. The whole place smelled like polished ambition. Everyone was dressed to impress: reporters, analysts, private equity reps, and Sabrina standing at the head of the room like she'd already won. I stood outside for a full minute before walking in. No entourage, no announcement, just me. Tailored suit, freshly shaved, a leather briefcase in my hand. I could feel the temperature drop as I entered. Conversation stalled. Forks froze mid-air. Sabrina's voice, mid-sentence, faltered as her eyes landed on me. "You're not supposed to be here," she whispered, almost too low for anyone to hear. Almost. I stepped closer, calm and unbothered. "Actually, I am," I said. "Check the ownership agreement. Page 6. Clause 21. Julian narrowed his eyes at me, unsure whether to smile or sneer. He chose neither. His fingers fidgeted with the lapel of his blazer. Sabrina's face was a pale mask of disbelief, painted confidence cracking at the edges. She didn't move, didn't blink. Because she couldn't. Not after reading the expression on my face. I turned toward the table of board members, 7 of them, all important, all slightly amused by the tension but too professional to show it. I laid the briefcase on the table, unlatched it with a click that echoed louder than any mic could. Inside was everything. The notarized documents detailing my original 51% ownership stake. Timestamped emails Sabrina never expected anyone to read. Financial reports from Marshall, complete with account numbers tied to Julian. Screenshots of offshore transfers disguised as vendor payments. Handwritten notes with forged board signatures. Everything. I took my time, sliding copies of the evidence to each board member like it was a friendly poker game. "Before you move forward with this IPO," I said, "you should know the current executive team has engaged in activities that would make any investor rethink their excitement." One of the board members, Marla Chambers, adjusted her glasses and flipped through the documents. "These are serious allegations, Mr. Monroe." "They're not allegations," I replied. "They're facts." Julian leaned forward, clearing his throat. "This is just a disgruntled ex-husband trying to eat." I didn't let him finish. I turned my laptop toward the room and hit play. An audio file crackled to life. Julian's voice came through clear, cocky, unaware. "Just keep rerouting the funds, babe. By the time the IPO hits, no one will be able to trace it. He won't even know what happened. Trust me. Caleb's too busy licking his wounds." Another file followed, a screen recording of the cryptocurrency transfers, traced directly to Julian's wallet. Then a photo. Julian, shirtless, standing next to Sabrina on the balcony of a luxury suite in Tulum. Timestamped the same day she claimed she was attending a Women in Tech panel in Seattle. Silence stretched across the room like a taut wire. Then came the gasps. Julian's composure shattered first. He turned to Sabrina, his voice barely restrained. "You said this was covered. You said." She didn't reply. She just stared at the laptop screen like it was a window into her own funeral. One of the older board members, Eugene Lee, looked up at me. "So what do you want, Mr. Monroe?" I pulled out one last document, a motion to invoke executive override. Signed by me, the majority stakeholder. Effective immediately, I'm suspending both Sabrina Monroe and Julian Rhodes from their positions at Vivewell pending formal investigation. Julian stood up, knocking over his chair. "You can't do this." I didn't flinch. I just did. The board murmured. Security was called. Julian was escorted out first, still shouting threats no one listened to. Sabrina remained seated. Her mouth opened, then closed. No words came. I gathered my papers, slid them neatly back into the briefcase, and clicked it shut. Before I left, I walked to Sabrina's side, leaned in close enough that only she could hear me, and said, "You built a kingdom on quicksand. And you forgot who poured the foundation." Her lips trembled, not out of anger. Out of something she hadn't felt in a long time: powerlessness. As I turned to walk away, the cameras in the back clicked and flashed. The same reporters who had written glowing profiles of the wellness power couple were already scribbling new headlines. I didn't need to tell them a story. The story had just told itself. By the time I exited the building, my phone buzzed. "Avery, board is backing you. Full support. Julian's account's frozen. SEC has been looped in." I typed 2 words. "Begin audit." I looked up at the sky. It had started to drizzle. Soft, almost apologetic rain. Let it wash over her too, I thought. Because the storm was only beginning. It didn't take much. That's the thing about men like Julian. They burn bright when everything's handed to them. but fold the moment the spotlight turns cold. The board meeting was barely over when he caved. The same man who had been smug and untouchable just hours earlier was now sweating in a dim conference room, his Gucci loafers tapping against the polished floor in nervous rhythm. He started talking before we even asked a question. Avery and I sat across from him. No threats, no pressure, just silence and a recorder on the table. It turns out silence is more effective than intimidation. People like Julian can't tolerate silence. It forces them to fill it. With confessions. With excuses. With guilt. She told me the money was clean, he said, wiping his forehead with a linen pocket square that looked too delicate to do anything useful. She said you'd signed off on the transfers, that it was all part of some tax maneuvering. I didn't blink. Didn't smile. And you didn't think to verify any of that? I asked, folding my hands on the table. He shrugged, looking smaller than he ever had on his self-help podcasts and meditation live streams. I trusted her, he said, and I almost laughed. Trust. That fragile currency they used to rob me blind. She said it was a bonus for helping her scale the brand. 4. Emotional labor. Avery raised an eyebrow. Emotional labor? Julian nodded, more defensive now. Yeah, man. I helped her rebrand. I brought in half her influencer network. I boosted her confidence. Then why did you need to hide it in offshore accounts? I asked. His eyes dropped to the table. That was all we needed. By the end of the hour, we had enough to draft a full deposition. He turned over emails, voice notes, even internal planning docs where Sabrina outlined how to move money from research grants into Julian's consulting firm. The trail wasn't just hot, it was molten. We wouldn't need months of legal wrangling. We had receipts. We had motive. We had Julian. That night, my phone buzzed as I was pouring myself a drink in the suite I now called home. Sabrina. Again. The first call I let ring. The second I stared at. The third I answered, curiosity edging out apathy. Her voice was soft, frayed. Caleb, can we talk? I let the silence sit there a moment. You mean in between federal audit meetings? Or before your fraud charges drop? She sighed. Please don't do this over the phone. I'm not doing anything, I said, swirling the bourbon in my glass. You did this. I just brought a flashlight. There was a pause. I could hear her breathing, trying to stitch herself back together. I know I messed up, but we were nothing. I cut in. Not for a long time. You just didn't notice because you were too busy rehearsing press statements. Her voice cracked. I didn't think you'd actually fight back. That made me pause. Not because I was surprised, but because it was the most honest thing she'd said in years. She'd miscalculated, thinking I'd always be the silent investor, the loyal dog waiting by the door for scraps of affection. She forgot that silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's strategy. You should talk to Julian, I said coldly. I hear he's got a lot to say. Wait, what? She stammered. I didn't respond. Just let that silence hang between us like a guillotine. Then I ended the call. By the next morning, Sabrina's access to Vivewell's internal systems had been fully revoked. Her login credentials disabled. Her office, glass-walled and once filled with designer orchids, was now dark. Pending review, sign hung outside. I sent Tanya Bishop, our newly appointed interim CEO, a message. You're in charge now. Start clean. Tanya replied instantly, already drafting policy updates and team shifts. Thank you for trusting me. That's what trust was supposed to feel like. Later that afternoon, word spread fast. Julian had turned state's witness, offering full cooperation in exchange for reduced charges. Sabrina's world, once perfectly arranged in curated Instagram squares and lifestyle magazine features, began to unravel. She tried to post a statement, something vague about restructuring and visionary transitions, but the comments flooded in too fast. People weren't buying it anymore. And that's when the press called me. They wanted the exclusive. The story behind the ousting. The investor twist. The betrayal, the recovery, the drama. But I didn't give them everything. I didn't need to. I said one line, and it was enough. Vivewell was built on values. Somewhere along the way, those values were replaced by vanity. We're just restoring what was lost. That quote made every major outlet. Julian tried to reach me once after that. Probably to beg for another deal, maybe even to apologize. I never called him back. That chapter was closed. Sabrina? She stayed silent. For once. But I knew it wasn't over for her. Not yet. She wasn't built for obscurity, and this fall from grace would rot her from the inside. She would lash out, try to reclaim relevance. Try to spin this. But she was playing checkers. I was already writing the rulebook for chess. It started with a headline, short, sharp, and just the right amount of scandalous. Founder ousted and husband stunning takeover. I was sipping black coffee in the corner of a quiet cafe downtown, tucked behind a digital paper like an old man avoiding the noise. But the noise found me. The story had legs and teeth. By noon, there were at least a dozen versions across every major outlet. They ran with it. All of it. One article broke it down like a screenplay. When Caleb Monroe transferred $5 million into his wife's wellness startup, Vivewell, he believed he was investing in a shared dream. What he didn't know was that dream came with betrayal, a secret boyfriend, and a trail of embezzled funds. What his wife didn't know. Caleb had a plan of his own, and it just went live. They quoted me, even though I never sat for an interview. Just one sentence from the investor memo I sent after invoking my executive override. We're returning the company to its core values. Transparency, wellness, and accountability. It was enough. By the time I returned to the Vivewell headquarters that afternoon, the office atmosphere had shifted. There was a buzz in the air, not tension, but something sharper. Energy, movement, hope. The same employees who used to glance away when I passed now looked me straight in the eye. A few even nodded. One, a junior engineer named David, walked up and said, "Thanks for not letting it crash. We were scared. But now, it feels different. Better." That meant more to me than any headline. In the executive lounge, Tanya Bishop was reviewing prototype specs. Sabrina had dismissed her once as too clinical, not visionary enough. But I'd read her pitches. She wasn't flashy. She was thorough, sharp. Her background was in public health tech, not wellness trends, and that's exactly what the company needed. "Tanya," I said as I stepped in, "from this moment on, you're not interim anymore. You're CEO. You've earned it." She looked up, stunned for only a second before she nodded, confident and calm. "Thank you, Caleb. I won't let you down." "I know," I replied. We set to work immediately, cleaning house, rewriting policy, and implementing oversight structures. No more creative consulting budgets. No more shady shell partnerships. Just transparent frameworks and products that actually help people. We paused the IPO temporarily, notified stakeholders, and retained a new PR firm. The world needed to see the real Vivewell now, not the glossy illusion Sabrina built, but the solid system we were rebuilding from its bones. And yet, even in the middle of progress, her name kept popping up. She released a video that night. Carefully lit, faux casual, sitting on the edge of some nameless white sofa. She wore no makeup. Her voice was soft, regretful. "I made mistakes," she said. "In love, in leadership. But I've always believed in Vivewell. And I hope it continues to thrive, even without me." It was a performance. The comments were split. Some sympathetic, others brutal. But one thing was clear, she wasn't in control anymore. The narrative had shifted, and she was reacting, not directing. Julian, meanwhile, had vanished. Rumor had it he tried to book a one-way ticket to Portugal before the feds froze his accounts. I didn't care where he went, so long as he stayed gone. We had bigger things to focus on: new wellness kits for post-operative care, partnerships with underserved clinics, tech that could actually change lives. I sat with Tanya, and the product team late into the night that week, reviewing updates on our biometric feedback loop. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about proving what could be done when ego was stripped from the mission. Still, the media storm raged on. From backup plan to boss, Caleb Monroe's quiet strike. $5 in betrayal becomes corporate thriller. How husband outsmarted Silicon Valley's wellness queen. Some of the headlines made me laugh. Others made me pause. Because I never wanted to be the face of anything. Not like that. I had always preferred working in the background, strategizing, building. But when Sabrina made me her pawn, I had no choice but to play the game. And now, I was rewriting the rules. At the next board meeting, I formally introduced Tanya's promotion, unveiled the 6-month restructuring roadmap, and showed the updated investor confidence metrics. We'd lost a few early funders who were emotionally tied to Sabrina's image. But we gained new ones, serious ones, real players. After the meeting, as everyone filtered out, I stayed behind, looking out the glass wall that faced the city. Sabrina used to stand right there during sunset, holding a glass of wine and talking about manifesting growth. I preferred data. I preferred movement. She built an empire on aesthetics. I was here to build something that would outlast every flashbulb. So yes, The press found the story. But the real story? It had only just begun. I wasn't surprised when she came. I knew it was only a matter of time. Sabrina always had a flair for dramatic timing and showing up unannounced. Without her heels, without her entourage, without her carefully constructed mask, was the only card she had left to play. It was just after 7 p.m. I was still in the office, combing through projections with Tanya, when Daniel from security buzzed in. "There's a woman downstairs. Says she doesn't have an appointment, but she's insisting." "Name?" I asked, though I already knew. "Sabrina Monroe." Tanya gave me a cautious glance. I held her gaze for a moment, then nodded. "Send her up." When the elevator doors slid open, Sabrina stepped out slowly, as if afraid the ground beneath her would give way. She looked nothing like the woman from the launch events or the glossy magazine covers. No smoky eye makeup, no tailored dress, just a worn hoodie, leggings, and sneakers, clothes she probably hadn't worn in years. Her face was puffy, her eyes bloodshot, and her lips parted like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the script. I didn't offer a seat. I didn't offer a drink. I just stood there, behind my desk, hands tucked in my pockets, waiting. "I made a mistake," she said finally, her voice cracking around the words. "I made 1,000 mistakes." I said nothing. "We were a team, Caleb. I lost sight of that," she added, stepping forward slightly. I thought I had to be the face of it all. The brand. The vision. And I was supposed to be what? I asked, calm and direct. "Your wallet? Your silent partner? The guy in the shadows until you decided I'd outlived my usefulness?" Tears streamed down her cheeks. "No," she whispered. "You were everything. I didn't realize how much until it was gone. Until you threw it away." She nodded slowly, her hands trembling as she clasped them together. "Julian's gone. He's not returning my calls. His accounts are frozen. He's probably in hiding." Her voice faltered, and she looked away. "Everyone's pulling out. The investors, the brand partners, even some of my friends." I let her feel that silence. "This wasn't supposed to happen," she murmured. "We were supposed to build something real." "We did," I said flatly. "You just built your half on lies." She stepped closer again, carefully, like someone approaching a wounded animal. "Please, Caleb, can we talk? Just you and me. Not lawyers. Not boardrooms. Just us." I pulled open a drawer in my desk and took out the manila folder I'd been keeping for this moment. Thick with paperwork, it made a dull thud as I placed it between us. "What's this?" she asked, wiping her face. "Your legal liabilities," I said. "Everything you've signed. Everything you've shifted. Every document tying you to misuse of funds, breach of contract, and investor deception." She didn't touch it, just stared at it, as if touching it would make it more real. "You walked out on me, Sabrina," I said quietly. "You told me to get out, remember? That your new boyfriend needed space. That I was just a stepping stone." "I didn't mean it," she whispered. "But you meant it enough to say it." She started to sob again, deep, guttural sobs that shook her shoulders and echoed in the quiet room. But I didn't move. I didn't console her. I let her cry, because she needed to feel it. After a few long moments, she looked up, her mascara smudged, her voice hoarse. "Is there anything I can do to fix this?" I shook my head. "Not with me." Her lip quivered, but I didn't waver. "You know," I said, stepping around the desk, "when I gave you that money, I didn't expect you to build me a monument. I just thought, maybe we'd build something together. Something honest. But you chose differently." "I was scared," she whispered, "of not being enough. Of being just someone's wife. So you became someone else's con instead." That stung. I saw it in the way she flinched. I walked to the door, opened it, and stood aside. She looked at me, one last, pleading look. But I didn't flinch. "Goodbye, Sabrina," I said. She picked up the folder, clutching it to her chest like a verdict, and walked out without another word. When the door closed behind her, I leaned back against it for a second, breathing in the silence she'd left behind. Not relief, not satisfaction, just stillness. Tanya walked back in a moment later, holding 2 folders. She didn't ask what had happened, just handed me the updated forecasts. "You good?" she asked. I nodded once. "Yeah, she'll try something else," Tanya added, almost as a warning. "She already did," I said. "Now it's my turn to finish what she started." Because this wasn't about punishment. This was about reclaiming my place. And I had only just begun. There's something poetic about starting over in a place built on ruins. Vivewell was never supposed to be a hollow brand, a glossy projection of healing wrapped around greed. It was supposed to mean something. It was born from an idea Sabrina once whispered to me in bed about making wellness accessible, personal, rooted in science and compassion. That idea? That vision? I still believed in it, even if the person who spoke it had betrayed everything it stood for. After Sabrina was removed, we didn't celebrate. There was no champagne, no victory laps, just work. Real, grueling, soul-deep work. I spent the first week going floor by floor, desk by desk, listening. Not giving speeches, just listening. To the engineers who had brilliant ideas but were never heard. To the marketing interns who were forced to push campaigns they knew were hollow. To the medical advisors who had quietly resigned when data was twisted to fit a narrative. And slowly, something started to shift. People spoke more freely. Doors stayed open longer. The air wasn't tense with fear of stepping out of line. It felt like a company again, not a stage. We restructured our priorities immediately. The celebrity partnerships were terminated. The influencer campaigns paused indefinitely. We redirected funds to actual product development. Tanya took the lead like she was born for it. She wasn't flashy, but she was precise, data-driven, focused. She assembled a new product team, people who had been pushed aside under Sabrina's reign because they didn't look the part. Our first big decision was to scrap the AI detox bracelet that Sabrina and Julian had been championing. It was overpriced, under-researched, and based on pseudoscience. In its place, we fast-tracked a personalized biometric patch that could monitor hydration, cortisol, and glucose levels in real time, actual wellness, not just wearable jewelry disguised as health tech. Clinics wanted it. Hospitals asked for early demos. Investors returned, not because of hype, but because of proof. And we didn't stop there. We launched the ViveWell Community Clinics Initiative, pop-up locations in underserved neighborhoods that offered free screenings, consultations, and early access to our tech. It wasn't about optics. It was about real people, real results. I visited the first one in South Oakridge. I watched an elderly woman cry as her daughter explained that for the first time in 5 years, they were getting proactive health support without red tape or medical bills they couldn't afford. The daughter said to me, this is what companies should be doing. I didn't respond. I just nodded, because for the first time in a long time, I felt something real again. Something honest. Internally, we dismantled the power structures that allowed egos to thrive unchecked. We installed whistleblower protections, held monthly town halls, and tied executive bonuses to ethical benchmarks, not just profits. Sabrina's name was scrubbed from every public record, press kit, and product. Her glossy quotes about energy alignment and intuitive synergy were replaced with clear mission statements, data, access, integrity. I held one press conference. I stood at a podium in a simple navy suit, no teleprompter, and said this. ViveWell was never meant to be a brand built on personality. It was meant to be a solution. Our mission going forward is simple, technology that helps people live longer, live better, and live honestly. The past taught us what to avoid. Now we focus on what to build. That quote went viral. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was grounded. Julian, as far as I knew, had fled the country. Dubai, maybe. Or Singapore. The SEC issued their reports quietly, but thoroughly. Sabrina was never arrested, but the settlement with investors left her financially gutted. The house was sold. Her brand deals vanished. And when she tried to launch a new conscious living venture online, it was met with mockery. The world had moved on. The curtain had fallen. And I stood taller. Not out of ego, but because I could finally breathe without the weight of pretending. I used to be the husband, the man behind the curtain, the man who paid the bills while someone else smiled for the cameras. Now, I was the architect, the name at the bottom of the contract, the voice on the quarterly call. But I didn't need the spotlight. I just needed the structure to stand without lies. There were still scars. The kind you don't talk about in interviews. Like the quiet ache in my chest when I drive past the house I used to own. Or the half-second hesitation before opening a new message, wondering if it's another ghost from the past trying to claw their way back in. But then I'd walk through the new ViveWell campus, walls painted with vision statements created by the team, not by PR firms. I'd see Tanya leading strategy sessions, interns presenting bold ideas, patients testing products that actually worked. And I knew we were building something that mattered. We weren't just rebirthing a company. We were rebirthing truth. One decision at a time. I hadn't heard Sabrina's name spoken out loud in weeks. It was like the world collectively agreed to move past her. Investors, employees, reporters, they all turned the page. But I knew better than to believe silence meant closure. With Sabrina, silence was just the inhale before another performance. So when my assistant told me her lawyer had requested a call, I wasn't surprised. Only mildly curious. Clara Dean, the attorney in question, had a reputation quiet, elegant, lethal in litigation. If Sabrina had finally hired her, it meant things were worse than I thought. I agreed to the call, but not before reviewing every document, every clause, every thread tying Sabrina to Vivewell. Tanya and our general counsel sat in the adjacent room, ready to step in if needed. The call came through right on time. "Mr. Monroe," Clara said, her voice crisp and calm. "Thank you for making time." I leaned back in my chair. "Let's not pretend this is a social call." "Fair enough," she replied. "I'm reaching out on behalf of Ms. Sabrina Monroe regarding potential settlement terms related to her ongoing exposure to civil action tied to Vivewell and its former executive practices." Translation, I said, "She's trying to avoid court." A pause. "She's hoping to resolve this quietly." I allowed myself a brief smile. Sabrina, the same woman who once laughed while throwing a crystal glass across our floor, now wanted quiet. Poetic. "What does she want?" I asked. "Freedom," Clara said. "No payout. No stake. Just closure. She's prepared to walk away from all remaining claims, both financial and reputational, if you'll sign off on a mutual non-disparagement and release of future litigation." "And why would I give her that?" I asked. "What's in it for me?" "She won't contest your leadership," Clara said. "She'll surrender all rights, formally and irrevocably. She'll walk away. No public interviews, no articles, no second-hand shots in the press. Just gone." That silence filled the room again. I tapped a pen against my desk. For weeks, I had envisioned every possible ending to this saga: courtroom battles, headlines, retribution. But in that moment, what I felt wasn't rage. It was clarity. Sabrina was finished. She didn't need a trial to lose. She already had. The public watched her vanish in real time. Her social accounts went quiet. The podcast offers dried up. Her name, once tied to innovation, had become synonymous with manipulation. She was radioactive. Even the people who once praised her for owning her story were now resharing articles about her fall like cautionary tales. I didn't need to ruin her further. She'd already done the heavy lifting. "Here's my offer," I said. "She walks. Completely. No stake. No compensation. No equity. No creative credit. She gets her name. That's it. Her name and her freedom. I keep the company. I keep the mission. I keep everything else." Clara didn't respond right away. "And if she ever breathes near Vivewell again," I continued, "if she so much as gives a quote to a blogger, this deal's void. Everything goes public. Every document. Every audio file. Every photo. Everything. More silence." "I'll deliver your terms," Clara said finally. The call ended, and I sat there staring out the window. The city skyline shimmered beneath the early evening light, that soft golden hue that made everything feel warmer than it was. Tanya walked in a minute later. "She's trying to settle," she asked. "She's not trying to." "She has to," I said. "We didn't celebrate. We just kept moving." The official paperwork came through the next day. I signed without hesitation. The only thing Sabrina retained was her name. No royalties. No influence. No fingerprints on anything we were building. Just the hollow comfort of being forgotten by the very company she once called her masterpiece. I released a statement that afternoon, not about her, but about the future. Vivewell has always belonged to its purpose, not any one person. We thank the early contributors for their efforts, and we are now focused solely on innovation, access, and truth. The past taught us what not to do in business. The future will reflect what we've learned. People read between the lines, of course. They always do. But that was fine. Let them speculate. Let them dissect. What mattered was what came next. Tanya and I finalized 3 new initiatives that week: rural diagnostic centers, subsidized mental health kits for veterans, and a collaboration with 2 major hospitals to integrate Vivewell's patch tech into patient recovery programs. Not a single one of those projects would have existed under Sabrina's watch. That night, I sat on the rooftop of my new apartment with a glass of whiskey and the city humming below me. For the first time in months, there was no email demanding my attention. No crisis. No staged apology on YouTube. Just quiet. And in that quiet, I remembered the man I used to be: quiet, focused, loyal to a fault. A man who built things for others, even when it cost him. But I wasn't that man anymore. I'd learned something through all this, that sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction. It's reconstruction, brick by brick. Without them, the lake house was quiet. Not the kind of silence that presses down like a weight, but the kind that lets you breathe. I bought it 3 weeks after the settlement was finalized. Tucked between evergreens with a wraparound porch and a view of still water that caught the sky just right in the morning. It was nothing like the mansion Sabrina and I once shared. That place was all marble and mirrors. This had soul. Wood beams that creaked like they were alive, floors that remembered footprints, a fireplace that crackled like it had something to say. It wasn't a retreat. It was a beginning. People kept asking if I'd finally rest, if I'd relax now that the storm was over. But what they didn't understand, what Sabrina never understood, is that I was never building for comfort. I was building for legacy. And you don't rest when you've just reclaimed the blueprint. Within the first month, I launched the Monroe Foundation, named after my father. It was always something I wanted to do, but I'd spent too many years pouring my energy into someone else's vision. The foundation focused on tech mentorships for underfunded schools, entrepreneurship grants for single parents, and seed funding for startups rooted in integrity and public impact. Not everyone could get $5 million dropped into their lap like Sabrina did. But maybe, just maybe, I could help give others a real shot. I spoke at 2 conferences in the first quarter. The second was in San Diego, Tech for Good. Standing on that stage, looking out at thousands of young innovators, I realized I wasn't nervous. Not even a flicker. I used to hate crowds. Used to let Sabrina take the mic while I stayed behind the scenes. Now, my voice didn't shake. Because I wasn't selling a fantasy. I was telling the truth. People could feel the difference. After my speech, a group of college founders swarmed me, wide-eyed, hungry, hopeful. One of them, a girl named Elena, asked, "How did you know when it was time to stop being behind the curtain?" I smiled. When I realized the curtain was only there to keep me out. They didn't ask about Sabrina. Not directly. Occasionally, someone would reference that situation or what happened, but I never fed into it. That part of my story didn't need retelling. It had already served its purpose. Sabrina had tried to write me out of my own life. And yet, here I was, standing taller, clearer, louder than I ever had under her spotlight. Sometimes, though, her name surfaced in the background noise. Tech blogs would mention a new venture she was rumored to be starting. Wellness pop-ups. A podcast about growth and healing. But nothing stuck. Not really. The comments were brutal. People remembered. The internet doesn't forget betrayal dressed as branding. She reached out once more. A text. No context. Just, "I see you. I hope you're doing well." I didn't reply. Because I wasn't doing well. I was doing better. Much better. At Vivewell, Tanya had taken the reins with full control. She'd turned the company into a respected voice in medtech circles. She invited me to board meetings, not out of obligation, but because I'd earned my place. I sat beside people who actually valued what I brought, who asked my opinion and implemented it. The employees were thriving. The products were saving lives. The fake had been stripped out, and what remained was real. There was one moment I won't forget. We were hosting a live demo at a clinic we'd helped launch on the South Side, free walk-ins for veterans and low-income families. A little girl, maybe 8 or 9, held my hand as she showed me the wellness patch on her arm. Her father, an ex-Marine, had tears in his eyes as he whispered, "She hasn't been this healthy in years." That's when I knew. This wasn't about rebuilding what Sabrina tried to break. It was about building what she never could. Some nights, I'd sit on the dock outside the lake house, drink in hand, watching the moon ripple across the water. No noise. No press. Just me. And I'd think back to that night, the night she laughed, through her wine glass, and told me to get out. I almost smiled every time I remembered it. She thought she was ending me. She didn't know I'd already rewritten the story. The truth is, Sabrina's betrayal didn't break me. It built me. Because before she drained my accounts, I'd already drained her power. Before she threw me out, I'd already walked away in my mind. And before she laughed that cruel little laugh, I had already prepared the silence that would swallow her legacy whole. So when people ask me now, "Caleb, what's next?" I just smile. Because I'm just getting started.